Okay, thanks very much. And good morning, everybody. Good morning. Morning. I'm going to talk to you this morning about a subject that is very, very close to my heart. And as I actually got on a train this morning, got to Waterloo, and then decided that I'd ride my bicycle here. And as I was riding my bicycle here, I kind of thought, what is it that I really want to say today? And I think what I'm going to try and do this morning is I'm going to tell you a story of hope and recovery. I'm also going to hope that that story that I tell you of hope and recovery also sends a very strong message about the power of being able to speak about one's mental ill health. But it also might send a message about what could be the tragic consequences of not being able to speak about one's own mental ill health. And the story starts back in 2008. It's midnight on the 25th of January. And I wake up with the most massive of panic attacks. Now, up until the 25th of January 2008, I had never, ever experienced a panic attack in all my life. In fact, I don't think I had even used the words panic attack. I don't think I'd even been in a conversation with somebody about a panic attack. And I remember lying there having this panic attack. My fingers are tingling. The tips of my toes are tingling. My heart is beating like you can't believe. I'm breathing very, very quickly. I'm sweating. And so I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And I remember bumping my wife at the time and saying, Deb, I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And she said, why? And I kind of explained. And she said, well, why don't you get up and walk around the room? And so I get up, I walk around the room, I take some deep breaths. And slowly, the levels of anxiety begin to subside. I get back into bed, but I can't go back to sleep. And the reason I can't go back to sleep is because I now begin to catastrophize over the most insignificant issues in my life. I catastrophize and catastrophize. My levels of adrenaline are very, very high, and I'm petrified that if I fall back to sleep, it might happen again. At about 7 o'clock the next morning, my daughter, Jennifer, comes running into our bedroom. And she comes running into our bedroom because it's her 13th birthday. So you can imagine how much excitement there was in our household on the evening of the 25th and that morning. And she comes running into our bedroom because we always open presents at the end of the bed as a family. And all I can say to Jennifer and to Debbie and to her younger sister Anna is, please go away. And I can't engage in any laughter, enthusiasm, and all I want to do is just take the duvet and pull it over my head, and I want to engage with nobody. They go off to school, 10 o'clock, Debbie gets home. Where am I? Still in bed. And she says to me, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm feeling very, very anxious. I can't get myself out of bed. I can't even go downstairs to make a cup of tea or have a shave. And she says, this is not like you, Geoff. Please, will you go and see a doctor? And I kind of, what? A doctor? Why must I go and see a doctor? I haven't got any aches. I've got no pains. I'm not feeling nauseous. I've got no temperature. Why must I go to a doctor? Anyway, by about midday on the 26th of January 2008, I go and see a doctor. And the doctor begins to ask me a bunch of questions around my levels of irritability, my ability to sleep. And I say to him, well, it's funny you ask that. I am very irritable. My sleep has been very disjointed over the last couple of weeks and months. I kind of get to sleep, but then I'll wake up and I'll lie there and I can't go back to sleep. I don't really want to socialize with other people. I've become a bit of a recluse. I can't read a newspaper anymore because if I read something that's negative, it just triggers these feelings of anxiety and sadness. I don't hope for anything. I don't look forward to anything. I can't get on my bicycle to go for a ride of a morning, and I love cycling, and I love swimming, and I don't like doing the things that I used to just enjoy doing. And then he asks me a question, which was, have you had any suicidal thoughts? And I said to him, no, I am not sure what the answer to that question is. And he said, have you had any suicidal thoughts? And I sat back and I thought to myself, I'm going to be honest. And so I say, yes, I have. Because if we think the stigma around mental ill health is high, I think the stigma around suicide is even higher. But I say, yes. He says, have you planned it? I say, no, I haven't planned it, but I do know the method. He turns to me and he says, Geoff, you're ill. And I say to him, excuse me, doctor, ill? Ill with what? I mean, you haven't taken my temperature. You haven't used your stethoscope to listen to my chest. You haven't looked into my eyes. You haven't looked into my ears. You haven't taken my blood pressure. What do you mean I'm ill? He said, Geoff, you are suffering from anxiety-fueled depression. Now, you know, my understanding of the word depression up until that point, my understanding was probably the following. I'm an Arsenal supporter. And I sort of get 2/3 into every season and think that Arsenal might just win the league. And then the last third of the season, they disappoint me. And I turn to my mates and say, I am so depressed about the Arsenal football team. Or I'd wake up on a Saturday morning, not like this morning, which is such a beautiful day, but I'd wake up on a Saturday morning and it would be pouring with rain. And I would turn to Debbie and I would say to her, I am so depressed because it's raining and I can't go for a bicycle ride. That was my understanding of this term, depression. And here I am, diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. As I walk out of the doctor's rooms that day, I make a decision that saves my life. It saves my life. And the decision that I make as I walk out of the doctor's rooms, and in many ways, I'm liberated to make that decision because I had received a diagnosis. And so I leave the doctor's rooms and I make a decision, and the decision that I make is that I will not be burdened by the stigma that is associated with depression and anxiety. And so what do? I tell my family of what the diagnosis is. I tell my friends what the diagnosis is, and I tell my workplace. And at that stage, I was the global VP of HR for Unilever. I'd had about 20-odd years at that stage working for Unilever. And I made that decision to tell people that I wasn't suffering from glandular fever and therefore couldn't be at work for 3 months, or that I was suffering from bilharzia because I just spent some time in South Africa and swam in a dam and got bilharzia and therefore I couldn't be at work for 3 months. I would tell people that I was suffering from anxiety-fueled depression. And the reason that that saved my life is that I would say that 98% of the people that I told, the response that I got was the most overwhelming outpouring of love. And you know, it was only love and knowing how much I was loved that kept me alive. Not the medication, not the cognitive behavioral therapy, not slowly getting back onto my bicycle. But during those dark, dark moments, I mean, I was so naive about this illness. I was so naive. I remember the doctor saying to me, would you like some medication? And I said, yes, of course I want some medication. And the reason I was so keen to have the medication was because I thought that in 48 hours or 72 hours, I'd start to feel better. Well, guess what? 72 hours, I'm not feeling better. 6 weeks later, I'm still not feeling better. We have to change the medication. And during that period, I have dark, dark moments. Moments when I think that life's not worth living. And the only thing that kept me going was knowing how much I was loved by so many people. It's the only thing. And so over a period of about 3 months, I get myself better. I go back to work. This is 2008. 2010, I have a relapse. Nothing as bad as 2008. And then in October of 2012, I'm walking home one evening. I've left Unilever House in Blackfriars. I'm walking over Blackfriars Bridge towards Waterloo Station. My telephone goes, and it's my wife. And she says to me, "Geoff, I've got terrible news." And I said to her, "What's wrong? Are the girls okay?" And she said, "Yes, the girls are fine." But she said, "One of your good friends died this afternoon." And I got home that evening and I said, immediately on the phone, I said to Debbie, I said, "Deb, what do you mean he died this afternoon? What happened?" And she said that he had taken his own life that afternoon. And you know, often, I don't know who said this, and I'm not going to take any credit of who said it, but it's so true, that the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Think about that. Ruby Wax, Stephen Fry, Robin Williams, Vici. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And here was a friend of mine who brought so much energy, love, and passion to the world, and now he was gone. And I lay in bed that night, and I thought to myself, what's the difference in our two situations? Here I am in 2012, learning each day to recover and live as an anxiety-fueled depressive, and my friend is gone. And the only difference was my ability to talk and his inability to talk. And I'm not saying today that had he been able to talk, he would definitely be with us today, but I think there's a better chance. And I lay there and I thought to myself, that's not fair. That's not fair. How can we be living in a world in the 21st century where we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about putting men and women on the moon and bringing them back safely, we're now putting them into space, we talk about driverless motor cars, yet we live in a world where people still don't feel that they genuinely have the choice to just put their hand up and to ask for some help if they might be suffering from a mental ill health condition like depression, anxiety, or bipolar. And I lay there and I came to the most simple conclusion. And the conclusion that I came to that night was that stigma has just killed my friend. And that I have to do something about that. I didn't know where to start because I'm a South African living down in Surrey with a bunch of other South Africans. I'm working for Unilever in a global job at the time, and my network is global. And so that night I go onto my iPad and I Google an individual by the name of Alistair Campbell, who back in 2012 was doing a lot of advocacy and campaigning work in the area of mental health. I find his website in the bottom right-hand corner. In the bottom right-hand corner is an email address. And I think to myself, if I write to him and ask him to meet with me, I know that that will be the beginning of a journey. It will be the beginning of a journey of where he will open some doors for me, which will allow me to advocate and to campaign and to consult to workplaces on helping to break the stigma of mental ill health at work. I write him an email from Geoff.McDonald@btinternet.com in those days, not Tony.Blair@ukgovernment.com to Alistair Campbell. And within 10 minutes, he's responded to my email. A week later, we meet up in Belsize Park. And ever since that day, the journey begins. And the journey that I'm on today is a journey which started in November of 2012. And it's driven by a deep, deep sense of purpose. A deep sense of purpose. I think it was Mark Twain who once said, the two most important days in your life, what are they? The day you were born and the day you find out why. And that deep sense of purpose that I have is to try and create workplaces. And when I talk about a workplace, I talk about a university. I talk about a kindergarten. I talk about the NHS. Yes, I talk about an HSBC as a financial institution. Yes, I talk about a Unilever, a Procter, an EasyJet. But I'm trying to create workplaces all over the world, where people in those workplaces feel that they genuinely have the choice to just put their hand up and to ask for some help if they are suffering from a common form of mental ill health. There is no workplace anywhere in the world where people, I think, they feel that they don't have the choice to talk about their physical ill health. Now, there are some areas of physical ill health that people don't want to talk about. But in most workplaces all over the world, people feel that they can ask somebody for help if they are suffering from a physical illness. Yet, in the 21st century, we still have workplaces where millions and millions of people are suffering in silence because they don't think that they can just put their hand up and ask for help. And I am determined to change that. I am determined to change that. Now, what is it that you as individuals here today could do to also join that crusade that I'm on of creating these sorts of workplaces? And I would like to leave you with 3 thoughts on what is it that you could just be doing at an individual level to create those kind of workplaces. The first thing that I would ask you to do is that I ask you to just reflect on your own relationship to mental ill health. What is that relationship? Is it a relationship of tolerance, or is it a relationship of intolerance? And if it's a relationship of intolerance, please go and be curious about this. Please go and learn. Please go and talk to somebody who might have suffered, so that over time that the relationship of intolerance becomes a relationship of tolerance to somebody who might be suffering from a mental ill health condition. So that's the first thing I would ask you to do. Reflect on that relationship. The second thing that I would ask you to do is just start a conversation about mental health. That might be a conversation with a friend. It might be a conversation with a group of friends. It might be a conversation with your husband, your wife, your partner. It might be a conversation in the place that you work. But please just start a conversation, because I honestly believe that if we can just get the conversation going, anything is possible. Anything. Once upon a time, a guy by the name of Kennedy started a conversation about putting a man on the moon and bringing him back safely. Guess what? It happened. It happened. And the third thing that I would ask you to consider is when you feel comfortable, when you might have enough support, coaching, when you're ready, please go and tell your story of mental health or mental ill health. Because we've all got a story. Now, you might not all have a story like mine, but we've all got a story. We've got a brother, we've got a mother, we've got a father, we've got a son, we've got a daughter. And if you're going to tell a story of somebody else, please get their permission to tell that story. But please tell your story. Because every story that we tell, do you know what it's like? It's like sending a lifeboat out into the ocean. And the millions and millions of people who are suffering in silence today, do you know what they do? They cling onto the lifeboat. And they realize that they might just be normal. Just be normal. And I hope that the lifeboat that I've sent out today leaves you with a sense of hope, and it also leaves you with a sense of, you know what? You can get better. And it also leaves you with a sense of how powerful it is to just be able to ask for some help. Thank you.